to trustee their sovereignty as regards international affairs into the hands of global government. Under global government, the national groups will be afforded a real opportunity to realize and enjoy the personal liberties of genuine democracy. The fallacy of self-determination will be ended. With global regulation of money and trade will come the new era of worldwide peace. Soon may a global language evolve, and there will be at least some hope of sometime having a global religion, or religions with a global viewpoint. Collective security will never afford peace until the collectivity includes all mankind. The political sovereignty of representative mankind government will bring lasting peace on earth, and the spiritual brotherhood of man will forever ensure goodwill among all men. And there is no other way whereby peace on earth and goodwill among men can be realized. After the death of Symboiton, his sons encountered great difficulties in maintaining a peaceful faculty. The repercussions of Jesus' teachings would have been much greater if the later Christian teachers who joined the Urmia faculty had exhibited more wisdom and exercised more tolerance. Symboiton's eldest son had appealed to Abner at Philadelphia for help, but Abner's choice of teachers was most unfortunate in that they turned out to be unyielding and uncompromising. These teachers sought to make their religion dominant over the other beliefs. They never suspected that the oft-referred-to lectures of the caravan conductor had been delivered by Jesus himself. As confusion increased in the faculty, the three brothers withdrew their financial support, and after 5 years the school closed. Later it was reopened as a Mithraic temple, and eventually burned down in connection with one of their orgiastic celebrations. 7. The 31st year, AD 25. When Jesus returned from the journey to the Caspian Sea, he knew that his world travels were about finished. He made only one more trip outside of Palestine, and that was into Syria. After a brief visit to Capernaum, he went to Nazareth, stopping over a few days to visit. In the middle of April, he left Nazareth for Tyre. From there he journeyed on north, tarrying for a few days at Sidon, but his destination was Antioch. This is the year of Jesus' solitary wanderings throughout Palestine and Syria. Throughout this year of travel he was known by various names in different parts of the country: the carpenter of Nazareth, the boat-builder of Capernaum, the scribe of Damascus, and the teacher of Alexandria. At Antioch, the Son of Man lived for over 2 months, working, observing, studying, visiting, ministering, and all the while learning how man lives, how he thinks, feels, and reacts to the environment of human existence. For 3 weeks of this period he worked as a tent maker. He remained longer in Antioch than at any other place he visited on this trip. 10 years later, when the Apostle Paul was preaching in Antioch and heard his followers speak of the doctrines of the Damascus scribe, he little knew that his pupils had heard the voice and listened to the teachings of the Master himself. From Antioch, Jesus journeyed south along the coast to Caesarea, where he tarried for a few weeks, continuing down the coast to Joppa. From Joppa he traveled inland to Jamnia, Ashdod, and Gaza. From Gaza he took the inland trail to Beersheba, where he remained for a week. Jesus then started on his final tour as a private individual through the heart of Palestine, going from Beersheba in the south to Dan in the north. On this journey northward he stopped at Hebron, Bethlehem, where he saw his birthplace, Jerusalem, he did not visit Bethany, Beeroth, Lebonah, Sichar, Shechem, Samaria, Gibeah, En-Ganim, Endor, Madon. Passing through Magdala and Capernaum he journeyed on north, and passing east of the waters of Merom, he went by Karata to Dan or Caesarea Philippi. The indwelling thought adjuster now led Jesus to forsake the dwelling places of men, and betake himself up to Mount Hermon, that he might finish his work of mastering his human mind and complete the task of effecting his full consecration to the remainder of his life work on earth. This was one of the most unusual and extraordinary epochs in the Master's earth life on Urantia. Another and very similar one was the experience he passed through when alone in the hills near Pella, just subsequent to his baptism. This period of isolation on Mount Hermon marked the termination of his purely human career, that is, the technical termination of the mortal bestowal, while the later isolation marked the beginning of the more divine phase of the bestowal. and Jesus lived alone with God for 6 weeks on the slopes of Mount Hermon. 8. The sojourn on Mount Hermon. After spending some time in the vicinity of Caesarea Philippi, Jesus made ready his supplies, and securing a beast of burden and a lad named Tiglath, he proceeded along the Damascus road to a village sometime known as Beit Gen, in the foothills of Mount Hermon. Here, near the middle of August A.D. 25, he established his headquarters, and leaving his supplies in the custody of Tiglath, he ascended the lonely slopes of the mountain. Tiglath accompanied Jesus this first day up the mountain to a designated point about 6,000 feet above sea level, where they built a stone container in which Tiglath was to deposit food twice a week. The first day, after he had left Tiglath, Jesus had ascended the mountain only a short way when he paused to pray. Among other things, he asked his Father to send back the guardian seraphim to be with Tiglath. He requested that he be permitted to go up to his last struggle with the realities of mortal existence alone, and his request was granted. He went into the great test with only his indwelling adjuster to guide and sustain him. Jesus ate frugally while on the mountain. He abstained from all food only a day or two at a time. The superhuman beings who confronted him on this mountain, and with whom he wrestled in spirit, and whom he defeated in power, were real. They were his archenemies in the system of Satania. They were not phantasms of the imagination, evolved out of the intellectual vagaries of a weakened and starving mortal who could not distinguish reality from the visions of a disordered mind. Jesus spent the last 3 weeks of August and the first 3 weeks of September on Mount Hermon. During these weeks he finished the mortal task of achieving the circles of mind understanding and personality control. Throughout this period of communion with his heavenly Father, the indwelling adjuster also completed the assigned services. The mortal goal of this earth creature was there attained. Only the final phase of mind and adjuster attunement remained to be consummated. After more than 5 weeks of unbroken communion with his Paradise Father, Jesus became absolutely assured of his nature and of the certainty of his triumph over the material levels of time-space personality manifestation. He fully believed in, and did not hesitate to assert, the ascendancy of his divine nature over his human nature. Near the end of the mountain sojourn, Jesus asked his Father if he might be permitted to hold conference with his Satania enemies as the Son of Man, as Joshua ben Joseph. This request was granted. During the last week on Mount Hermon, the great temptation, the universe trial, occurred. Satan, representing Lucifer, and the rebellious planetary prince, Caligastia, were present with Jesus and were made fully visible to him. And this temptation, this final trial of human loyalty in the face of the misrepresentations of rebel personalities, had not to do with food, temple pinnacles, or presumptuous acts. It had not to do with the kingdoms of this world, but with the sovereignty of a mighty and glorious universe. The symbolism of your records was intended for the backward ages of the world's childlike thought, and subsequent generations should understand what a great struggle the Son of Man passed through that eventful day on Mount Hermon. To the many proposals and counter-proposals of the emissaries of Lucifer, Jesus only made reply, "May the will of my Paradise Father prevail, and you, my rebellious son, may the ancients of days judge you divinely. I am your Creator Father, I can hardly judge you justly, and my mercy you have already spurned. I commit you to the adjudication of the judges of a greater universe." To all the Lucifer-suggested compromises and makeshifts, to all such specious proposals about the incarnation bestowal, Jesus only made reply, "The will of my Father in paradise be done." And when the trying ordeal was finished, the detached guardian seraphim returned to Jesus' side and ministered to him. On an afternoon in late summer, amid the trees and in the silence of nature, Michael of Nebadon won the unquestioned sovereignty of his universe. On that day he completed the task set for Creator sons to live to the full the incarnated life in the likeness of mortal flesh on the evolutionary worlds of time and space. The universe announcement of this momentous achievement was not made until the day of his baptism, months afterward, but it all really took place that day on the mountain. And when Jesus came down from his sojourn on Mount Hermon, the Lucifer rebellion in Satania and the Caligastia secession on Urantia were virtually settled. Jesus had paid the last price required of him to attain the